30-second game fact. Did you know that the original Donkey Kong arcade game was originally meant to be a Popeye game? In 1980, Nintendo released Radar Scope, meant to cash in on the success of Space Invaders, as it was a very similar game. However, it was a commercial failure, and Nintendo of America was looking to repurpose the unsold cabinets. Nintendo's top developers were preoccupied, so a first-time developer was up to the task, one Shigeru Miyamoto. He originally designed the game to feature Popeye, Olive Oil, and Bluto from the Popeye franchise, but at some point the licensing deal for those characters fell through. Popeye became Mario, Olive Oil became Pauline, and Bluto became Donkey Kong. Did you know that the multiplayer mode in the hit Nintendo 64 game Goldeneye 007 was created in only a month? In fact, it was supposedly only made by just one member of the game's development team. The team didn't ask for permission from Nintendo or Rare before adding multiplayer. In fact, neither of the publishers even knew it would be a feature until the devs were already showing it to them in working order. Considering that the game was already running late, this may be the only reason the feature made it into the game at all. Did you know that the Ultra Hand ability in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was actually named after a much older Nintendo product? Before video games, the company made toys, and in 1966, a toy by the name of Ultra Hand was created. It was essentially just a reach-extending device operated similarly to scissors. It was actually designed by the same man that led the creation of Nintendo's Game Boy over 20 years later. The reference would also make its way into other Nintendo games like Splatoon 3, Mario Kart 8, and WarioWare Gold. You may have heard of the nuclear Ghandi glitch in Sid Meier's Civilization franchise, but did you know that it was no glitch at all? The legend goes that an integer overflow glitch as far back as the first Civilization game caused Ghandi, well known for seeking peace, to be a fan of nuclear weapons. After this, the glitch was left in to the amusement of the developers. However, Sid Meier himself, as well as Civilization 2 lead Brian Reynolds, maintained that Ghandi was never that aggressive in Civilizations 1 through 4. The way that nuclear aggressiveness was programmed didn't match the description in the urban legend at all. However, this aspect of Ghandi's strategy did make its way into Civilization 5 on purpose as a joke. Did you know that the levels in Metal Gear Solid were actually initially laid out with Lego? Hideo Kojima said in a series of tweets a few years ago that he initially drew the entire map of all the levels together on graph paper, but this simply wouldn't do because it was a 3D game. He ended up designing the levels with Lego and moving a small camera through the area to act as the player's point of view. At one point he ran out of Legos and was unable to finish the map's design, but his staff gifted him plenty more for his birthday. Did you know that the infamous Sega Jingle in the original Sonic the Hedgehog supposedly took up an eighth of the cartridge's total storage capacity? The Jingle had been part of Sega's brand for a while in their commercials. Although it wasn't like the actual game was made to work around this. No, after the game was finished, there was still plenty of leftover memory. Originally, it was meant for a two-player split-screen mode, but they were unable to get it working. Instead, they used the famous soundbite. Audio codecs like MP3 weren't around at the time. Audio compression technology was much less powerful, and to sound good, the effect needed a high sample rate. All of this combined meant that this one little sound effect would end up being quite huge. Did you know that the title of the famous arcade game Pac-Man was originally going to be Puck-Man? This was in fact its name in Japan, although some think that the word puck was a reference to the character's resemblance to a hockey puck. It was in fact derived from a Japanese phrase, paku paku tabaru, which meant gobbling food up, referencing Pac-Man's constant opening and closing mouth. The title was instead changed for the North American release due to concerns that weren't so family-friendly, specifically that kids made to face arcade cabinets, scratching off part of the P to turn it into an F, making it look like the F word. Did you know that old games actually didn't have any computer code at all? That's right, the first home console, the Magnavox Odyssey, released in 1972, actually didn't have a CPU or code at all. Later on in gaming history, games would have ROMs with code and pixel tile databanks, but Odyssey games had none of that. They instead just had printed circuit boards with switches or jumpers that were used to turn different circuits on and off. Essentially, each cartridge modified the console's actual internal electronics differently to make various playable games. Did you know that the creator of Nintendo's Game Boy started as a maintenance tech at a Nintendo Hanafuda factory? Gunpei Yokoi worked at the assembly line when the president of Nintendo at the time took notice of a small toy Yokoi had made for himself. He was asked to develop it into a product, and it was called the Ultra Hand. He went on to become one of Nintendo's first game designers, being in charge of well-known franchises like Kid Icarus and Metroid. He would then go on to lead Nintendo R&D 1, which created the company's Game Boy in stiff competition with Nintendo R&D 2. You may know that Mario Party minigames can be a pretty intense affair, but do you know just how bad of a problem this became for Nintendo? Back in 2000, kids playing the original Mario Party for the N64 would find that using the joystick with their palm would seriously tear up their hands. Cuts, blisters, and even second-degree burns were reported. Although Nintendo did recommend using the joystick with your thumb, a lawsuit still ensued. Nintendo would end up offering to send 4 gloves to every household that owned a copy of Mario Party, over 1 million copies of which were sold in the US, a commitment of $80 million. Did you know that the manual for the original Super Mario Kart for SNES actually encouraged screen cheating as a viable strategy in versus mode? If you're not familiar, screen cheating is the strategy of looking at your opponent's screen in a split-screen game, and I'm sure it's been the subject of many arguments for a plethora of kids, as many believe it to be, well, cheating. Honestly, this doesn't come as much of a shock for Nintendo since it seems that many of their local multiplayer games are designed to ruin friendships. The original Super Smash Bros. Allows you to take lives from your teammates, as does Super Mario World, not to mention the very existence of Mario Party.